Hi, so in this week's tutorial we're going to look at creating vector based imagery. By now you should have had a look at different vector illustrations or illustrative style, and we're going to use those techniques to build back into the piece that we sort of started last week, where we used a brush and create our own sort of effects and filters going over the top. And essentially what we're going to have is the background of this cityscape form onto the sort of distance image within this panel. Okay, and this is another visual style, another process and technique that you can add or use independently without the brushes or with. So to do this, I want you to load up this cityscape, and we're going to focus specifically on just this area here. I really like this shape. It's going to give us a lot to play with. So I'm going to draw around this collection of buildings. Okay, so if we cut right in, and you will see how much of a low resolution image this is, which will mean we will probably need to resize the image before we start. So I'm going to go up to image, and I'm going to go to image size, and I'm just going to check, yeah, it's really low size there. So if we change this to centimeters, that seems a really lot for the size of the image. So we're going to change the pixels, and we want to times this by 4, which should leave us with 4096. Okay, and you can see we've increased the image by 4, but we've still got a sort of a blurry outline. So we're going to change this to hard edges, and you can see it's now pixelated again. So it's increased each pixel color to 4 pixels, and that's okay because we're not actually going to copy this image, we just want it for the outline. So we can click OK, and there we have it. That's much better, it's much clearer in terms of its size for when we draw our path. So we're going to use the pen tool, and the pen tool is this tool just above the text tool, and it looks like a pen, a fountain ink pen. And the pen tool essentially allows us to draw around a building. So I'm going to start down here, and I'm going to click, and you'll see as I draw around we start to get a line going around this building. And I'm going to draw around and just draw around all of these buildings that we have here, and just till we get to there. So far everything's been pretty straight, pretty linear. Okay, and nothing's really curving, and that's because I've been clicking down and making a solid straight sort of line. Now if I click with the left mouse button and drag, you'll start to see some curves forming. Okay, and I'm just going to click here, and if I zoom in very quickly, you will see, just excuse the lag, that we start to get that curve happening around here. I forget how laggy this is when I'm editing. Right, and you can see we're starting to get that curve, and not to worry because we can come back and edit these later on. So once I've drawn that curve around, I'm going to draw straight up to sort of draw around and click and drag again around this section, and always try to go about halfway to get a nice curve. And I'm just going to go up again, left mouse click, I'm going to drag again and right click, and this time I'm just going to create a point across the top there, and again we're just going to draw around. And if you push Ctrl Z, you can undo if you're unhappy with any of your positionings. And we'll go around again. And we will go down, all the way down here. And it's not going to work there. So your curves tend to have to be in a halfway position between your solid points, Otherwise, I'll show you with this top bit. So if I draw up, and we draw here, so if I start to try and implement a curve here, say, and then I try to go straight down, imagine the building went straight, you get that curve coming down, and we don't want that. So we do have to build our curves halfway. So I could build this one in here, make that curve go across the top pretty good, until I try to put this point in where the line curves around. So really what we want to be doing is aiming that in this midpoint. Okay, and I like this section of the roof because it gives us the most, it's quite really interesting shapes to create for our silhouette. And I'm just going to undo again. And just going to bring that down. Bring that across. And we'll leave that bit out. So I'm just going to sort of rush through these a little bit now. And we can create this dome. And obviously, you know, you can change the shapes. You don't have to stick with what is there. This is simply just a guide to create a background. And then I'm just going to follow this building down. Assume it ends down here. Just go down to the water edge and go across to this bottom piece here. Line that up. So I'll go through and just check that you're happy with your lines. If you're not, it's really good because we can actually add and take these away. So if we hold down our mouse on the pen tool icon, it will open up the sub menu, and we can go to add anchor point and delete anchor point. So I'm going to go through it. I'm going to delete this anchor point here, and I'm going to delete the one at this end of this building as well. There. And we can also add more in. So if we're like unhappy with this, for example, we could take it away, or we can add more in. If I wanted to sort of increase that, and I can't do that. Sorry, I keep thinking of an illustrator. And obviously, if we wanted to delete that again, we can. And if we did add one of those in, and we did say we did do this, and we wanted to keep the anchor point, but we don't want that, we can go to the convert point tool, which will allow us to bring that back down and change it. So we can change it from there, or go back to this state. Okay, we can drag it out, or we can go back to that state. The other thing that we can do is, obviously, if we want to add more things to this path layer. So this path is, this outline that we've done is on its own layer, which is separate to the background, which I'll show you in a second. And okay, stop moving. Right, and we can also draw freehand with this, and as you can see, it's creating its own points. Obviously, this is much more difficult to get a clean line, so I'd always recommend using the actual pen tool. So obviously, if we wanted to sort of draw these in, and if you hold shift, it will keep it all straight and lined up. As you can see, if I move the mouse out, it will keep it nice and straight. Okay. And once we're happy with that, what we want to do is convert this to a selection. So it's no longer just a path, which obviously, working with vectors, these paths are mathematical equations, which means that the pixel information doesn't exist until we turn it into a selection and add those to this layer. Okay, up until this point those pixels are not in existence. If we hide the background image, see if we can just hide that, you can see this outline. At this moment in time it is not a it doesn't have pixel information, so again we can sort of, by doing this, we can see where the imperfections are. And you know, I would probably spend a while just going back through and tweaking these, but as this is a sort of entry level demonstration, I'm not going to. So if we go to the path tool, and you will see that we have our work path. Okay, if we double click this, it will allow us to save it. So we're going to call this path buildings 1, and now we've saved our path, we can do things with it. We can stroke it, select it if we've got a layer active. So let's just go back through, create a layer that's visible, and if we right click, we're able to stroke the path, we're able to fill the path. We can turn the path to a selection. Okay, so I'm going to go to fill path, and I'm going to go and select a dark grey, and I'm going to click OK, and you will see that we now have that selected. I don't know, if I just deselect the path, you can see we have the outline of that shape, which is really cool. And what we can do with this is push Control or Command if you're on Mac, hover over the image and it will allow you to select it, then push Control, Shift and C and go to our scene here, push Control V, and you can see this has now brought that in. And remember, it's easier to scale down than it is to scale up, and then we can resize this till we're sort of happy with the size and the depth. If we go to our layers, we want it in this panel. I'm going to call this background buildings, and we're just going to rename that. Sorry, push enter first once you're happy with the size. Yeah, I'm happy with that size. I don't mind it sort of going drifting off into the background. We may need to make it a little bit bigger. Then we can rename this buildings, and we just want to reposition this somewhere like so. We may need to make this a little bit lighter, just so it differentiates from the background. So if we bring this further down, and we can actually reposition this if we select it at the top. We bring this down here, and we can just keep bringing this further down till we're happy with it. So just behind the foreground, like so. And you can see now that we have a sort of cityscape within the background. And obviously if we select this layer, we can hide this information by creating a mask, and it will now hide that behind. And we'll talk a little bit about layer masks. We talked about it in the last lesson if you watched the videos, but obviously if you haven't watched the videos previously yet, you may have learned about them in the lesson. So very quickly, we're adding more details to our environment, and it's just another way of doing this. In addition to that, we can create multiple layers. So if we actually wanted to add some more information to this, so if we wanted to add some windows perhaps, or say we wanted to add a strip, for example, you know, perhaps we want to, okay, so sorry about this lag, I really shouldn't scroll, my PC just doesn't like it. You know, perhaps we can start to draw in some window shapes, and you know, we can start to work those in. We could add some bigger windows maybe further down. It depends on the scale that you're going for, and you know, maybe we could keep making these bigger and bigger as we sort of go down the building. And we can just start to add in you know, these bits. But obviously working with this, it would be technically easier to use the square selection tool. Maybe we want to add in, work on some of these details that are going around this globe here. And obviously we can go back to our paths, we can select our new work path, change this to detail, and actually create a new layer, and again go to fill path, and you know, maybe we can make the colour into sort of dark red. OK, and we can go back and turn our layers on, and if we just deselect that, you can see it we started to get those extra details covered in. We could also mimic light and shadow effects. So again, think in particular with buildings, and with this part here we could actually draw around using the pen tool and create a sort of shadow and light section, okay, to create a more 3D effect. And if we just scroll down, and if you just draw very carefully around around this edge, and then we can double select this path and then create a new layer, and we would rename this something like shadow, building shadow, and what we're going to do is just go to fill path, and we'll just fill this in black, and if we just select off that, you can start to see that shadow come out. And again, we can do the same thing with the front. This time we can just draw down and just very carefully draw around again. Just go a little bit lower there. Go a little bit over there. Just undo that twice, went a little bit close there. And just close that off. And just also make the work path. We can rename these later, and again make a new layer. I'd call this one light, and this time we'll go to fill path, and we would go with white, and if we just go back and hide background there, in fact let's just create a new background. And we'll do a quick gradient. So we'll take blue. So we'll just look and then we'll just do a darker blue. And just get a gradient brush. So on a paint bucket, just hold it down and select gradients. And I'm just going to make sure both my colours are on. Yeah, cool. And there we go. Obviously we still need to do some tweaking, but if you imagine this effect applied to the whole of the image, you can imagine how sort of cool that will begin to look. So we can mimic sort of light effects to create a sort of 3D vector based image. We can use it to refine our details, and we can keep layering these up. We can apply them with brush effects to create backdrops and sort of more silhouettes. And yeah, so obviously it's another visual style that you can play about with. I would like you to go through and continue to experiment with this tool, and obviously document the experiments on your blog, and by now you should start to be applying some of these techniques for your final for your main comic book and children's book. Okay, so that's a really basic introduction to the pen tool and vector based illustration. So go away and have fun. See you soon.